This is EntreEd Talk, the podcast for entrepreneurial educators by entrepreneurial educators. We are your hosts, Toi Hirschman and
Amber Ravenscroft. This podcast is created by the National Consortium for Entrepreneurship Education, or EntreEd for short.
We are so excited to be reporting live from NACCE 2019 in Newport Beach, California, to bring you some awesome content.
We're featuring a few episodes that are part of a NACCE collaboration with EntreEd Talk, and we are doing them here from the conference on entrepreneurship explorations. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of EntreEd Talk. We are over the moon today to be able to talk to the author of What School Could Be, Ted Dintersmith. He's going to share a little bit about his background and the book and what he went through to meet with schools that are doing amazing things all over the country. We are beyond excited to have him. Welcome, Ted. Thanks for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm pumped.
I just need to get it out. I'm really sorry. I have my book.
Holding the book right now.
It has post-it notes.
This is going to be fun.
I'm so ready. Okay.
Ted, could you share with us a little bit about your journey and how you came to write this book?
Sure. Well, I spent most of my career in technology innovation. So if you backed up the clock, 15, 20 years ago, I certainly would have never anticipated I'd be immersed in the world of education. But a couple things happened in my career. One is I recognized how rapidly machine intelligence is moving forward and what that will do to jobs, to young adults, to society. And then the second thing is a growing sense of skepticism that when we think kids are learning something, that they actually really have learned it. And a growing sense of concern about the very skills and mindsets are going to need in a world driven by innovation, and how school, instead of fostering those, actually attacks them. And so I just sort of said, if in fact routine jobs are getting eviscerated by machine intelligence, and the creativity, the audacity, the curiosity of kids is being killed by school, which are arguably the three things that will let them do well in a world where machine intelligence does the routine, that seems like a big, big issue. Mm-hmm. And so I've spent the last decade, I did a film, travel all the time, written a couple books. And, as I said, 15 years ago, I certainly didn't anticipate this. Nobody around me did. But I feel it's the issue of our time. I think it's the single most important issue shaping the future of our children and the future of our democracy.
That's incredible.
We got to get it together.
we do. So can you tell everybody how many schools that you visited?
Well, during this, 3 to 4 years ago, I spent the entire year on the road. So I traveled for 10 and a half months, basically every day. I visited 200 schools that year. I did probably, 1,000 either small meetings or community forums. I actually hired, the campaign planning team for Mitt Romney to organize the whole year. So I got a lot out of it. I was going every morning. You can imagine a day where your first meeting is 7:30 in the morning and you wrap up at 10:30 at night after a screening of Most Likely to Succeed for 10 and a half straight months. And I think in some ways that intensity, that immersion gave me so many great things to write about that it really made it possible to write a book. Where actually when I started the trip, I had no idea I'd write a book. I just thought it'd be interesting to travel and sort of get a sense of what people are doing. And I also, one of my goals in the travel was I find way too often business people view themselves as education experts because they went to school. And they're really good at saying, this is, what we should be doing. And I do some of that, but I do it, I think, by amplifying the voice of our classroom teachers, of our dedicated principals. I work really hard. You could read my book and say whether I do a good job or not. That's subject to debate, but I promise you I work really hard to listen to and learn from the people actually fighting for the future of our kids. And I feel like if more business people did that, we'd have a far better set of perspectives brought to the world of education by business people.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in some of the insights that you found, but I think it's really good for us to frame the conversation for educators listening around this idea of the future of work, because you present this very quickly as a problem, but also very quickly pivot to an opportunity.
Yep.
And so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to where you see the future of work headed and why it's such a prevalent thing that we should be thinking about, especially in the K-12 arena.
Yeah. Well, in the work area, I just say anything that has an element of routine to it will be gone in 10 to 20 years. And anything that somebody does to earn a living that's physical, there will be agile robots that do it way better and increasingly for far lower cost. And that's millions, that's tens of millions of jobs. Anything that requires basic cognitive skills, some degree of pattern recognition, those jobs will be gone. And that's tens of millions of jobs. I also think, and I think it's a fair point in my discussions with people. People will say, well, isn't the purpose of school something broader than just career? And my answer to that is absolutely. And I was a liberal arts person in college. I got way more out of my English courses than I get out of my technical courses. So I'm a cheerleader for a broader, more liberal education. But I'm also concerned that what we think kids are learning, they're actually not learning, that we've turned it into too much of a high intensity, high stakes, standardized curriculum battle for kids, where the kids don't find it interesting. The kids don't retain it. And we think the ones that are smart and gifted are the ones who have good short-term memories. And the kids that are going to fall behind can't jam as much into short-term memory, can't game the system as well. And so when you put that together and you say those jobs, and it's not a job here and a job there, we're already seeing it. It's not as though this is down the road, that this is a 2030 phenomena. It is defining our world today. Today, the Rust Belt, when I went to all 50 states on my trip, I spent a lot of time in rural America. I spent a lot of time, most of the people who write books about education and give talks never go to. And you see these communities and they're being hollowed out. And why? And I think the reason why is, to a very large extent, the choices they've made in education. And maybe in many cases, not the choices they made, but somebody from outside made for them. And it could be the state, or it could be the federal policies and priorities. It could be a Bill Gates Common Core initiative. It could be a whole raft of things. But instead of letting kids in a community, whether it's an inner city community, a suburban community, a rural community, have voice in terms of getting good at something they know matters to their community, have learning experiences that connect the kids' tenacity, determination, and resourcefulness to vehicles and ways to make that community better, and realize that they can actually help that community find its way forward as they create their own career path. If that's what we do in education, it's like Katie barred the door for the potential of these kids. But that's not what we do in education. In my book, I say, naively, going into this, I thought the goal of education was to develop human potential. As I travel, I realized the goal of education today in America is to rank human potential on a very narrow set of increasingly irrelevant skills, driven by policymakers, testing organizations, a whole academic industrial complex that feels like the most important things our kids can do in school is to generate data for them, to track how little progress they're making on material they'll never use. And so I sort of say, shame on the policymakers. The good news here, and I think it's really good news, is our teachers know what to do. There's nobody, when I show my film, when they read my book, I don't find teachers saying, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of that. I think I hope anyway, respect that I have a degree of humility, that I say I'm not an education expert. I don't want to be introduced as an education expert. I'm just trying to tell you what I see as I travel that is transforming kids' lives, where the teacher feels trusted to teach to their expertise and help kids develop their potential. But they know what to do. The problem is our policies, our priorities, the expectations of parents are a whole set of factors that we dump down onto our schools that say, oh, no, you can't do something that where the kid thinks it's fun. like if a kid's having fun, they can't be learning.
Terrible.
You can't do something messy. You've got to make it clear what my kid has to do to get a good grade. I don't dare spend time on something that I don't see a direct path for a college application or for a state mandated test that keeps kids from graduating. And so when we do that to our teachers, what happens? And I think what happens. The morale plummets.
Yeah.
Teachers are leaving the field, the pipeline's drying up. And these teachers are incredible. They're the most dedicated, most committed. In venture capital, I worked with entrepreneurs. Most people would view entrepreneurs as dedicated and passionate and incredibly capable. I'd say, entrepreneurs, come look at some of our teachers. You're going to see the same thing you have and then some, except what are the differences? The differences are we don't pay teachers and we micromanage them. If we didn't pay entrepreneurs and micromanage them, we'd have an economy that looked like, whatever, Bangladesh. What would happen if we started to trust teachers? And I think that's what I hope my book draws out in highlighting great things all over the country, is when we trust teachers to create learning experiences, equip kids with skills that matter, that enable kids to produce or create something that has a positive impact on their world in a broad range of ways, by the way, and that gives kids that deep sense of purpose, that through their efforts and their learning, they can make a positive change in their world. And that positive change, just to be explicit, could be a great history essay. It could be a documentary. It could be a nonprofit they start. It could be a whole range. It could be a science experiment they create. It could be any one of a huge number of bold, creative, audacious things kids would love to take on. If that is a part of school, arguably a big part of school, then kids are going to leave school fired up and understanding that they have a role to play, a constructive role to play in the future of their community. But as I said, we don't do that, right? We don't do that. We put kids through this rigmarole, this jumping through hoops thing, going through curriculum. When they ask, am I ever going to use it? The honest answer is generally no.
Yeah.
And then we say, if we can just get the right graduation speaker, they're going to leave school feeling like they're an informed, responsible citizen, able to make their community better. And if we crush that out of them over 12 to 16 years, I don't care who gives a graduation speech, forget it.
Well, that's my mind's blowing over here. When we work with schools and teachers, that's generally the hurdle, because the leadership, the policies, standards, everything is, I know amazing teachers, but they feel like they're handcuffed. And the more standards that are put on, like the English teachers and that, the more standards that they have and the more policies they have, they feel like they can't do anything. And then some are even afraid to try because they're afraid that they're going to get pushback from parents, from their administrators. And it's a huge, huge problem. And we talk all the time about what our mission is to try to empower teachers, because they can't empower their students if they're not empowered. If they feel handcuffed, so do those students.
Yeah.
And when you look at these classrooms, I mean, kids are suffering, and we have little kids in third grade, fourth grade that hate school.
Our film, Most Likely to Succeed, starts with a scene where there's a fourth grader in a parent-teacher conference, and she's in tears as the parent and the teacher conduct a discussion with her sitting there. And, the issue is she started to hate school. And that's what happens. Around third, fourth, fifth grade, we decide we've got to get serious about school. They've got to really buckle down and start learning. Now, it turns out that kindergarten kids are learning at warp speed, master what they learn, retain it. And the higher you get in grades, the less the real learning is. But we decide we're going to get serious. And as I said, I don't put the blame here on the teachers. I put the blame on those that say this is a curriculum you have to cover. These are the tests these kids have to be prepared for. I mean, we wrap them up in a straitjacket and do it in such an irresponsible way. It's appalling. But anyway, in the scene, you just watch this girl in tears, and it's sort of this wake-up call. It's a great start for our film because it's what is school all about? And you realize that she doesn't see the relevance of what she's doing. And honestly, for a lot of the curriculum, particularly middle and high school, I think elementary schools often get things pretty darn right. If they weren't pressured to prepare kids for middle, then pressured for high, and then pressured for college applications, and pressured for terrible introductory college courses. I think if we got that off the necks of our teachers, they do incredible things. But how often do kids, as I said, particularly in middle and high school, if they ask, when will I ever use this? The honest answer is, beats me. It's like what a friend of mine, a woman named Lynn Stein at Olin, she has this great distinction. She says, so much of education in America is just in case education. Study something just in case you remember it and just in case you'll ever use it. She says, we need to get kids good at just-in-time learning. How can you learn what you need to learn to accomplish something you think is important? Because when the kids are applying it as they learn it, iterating with it, having to keep digging into it to make it really have the power that's there in that particular, skill or pedagogy aspect. If it's clear expository writing, are they going to be more motivated to write an essay that they give to a teacher and get an 83 back? Or if they're writing a letter to their school board talking about changes that have to be done in education. And it's actually going to be delivered to the school board. Maybe they're going to write a speech and give it to their school board. It's make it real. Kids get motivated. I want to add one other thing, which is this is a defining point. I mean, our education system, particularly K-12, has been laser-like focused, and I don't blame the focus on closing the achievement gap. That has been the defining mantra in education for 20, 30, 35 years. And what's interesting, right, is that while it's been the total focus, we've made no progress. And I say the two things that we have wrong about achievement gap in American education, they're just two. The first is gap and the second is achievement. And other than that, we've got it exactly right. But the gap we talk about is a test score gap. We don't want to talk about the fact that the kids in poverty get far fewer resources in their schools than the well-off kids. That's an uncomfortable discussion. I think it's a disgrace for a nation, the richest nation on earth. I visit these schools where kids in poverty go to schools in buildings that ought to be condemned. That's the gap we don't want to talk about. So let's turn it on to test scores. So then we can say it's really largely the fault of our students and teachers. And by the way, we'll define those test scores, tie them to content that nobody cares about. And so what happens when the content is boring and irrelevant? Who gets pushed to do that? The rich kids get pushed to do it. Think about SAT test prep. The rich families are hiring tutors. They're paying for the kid to take it 5 times. They're telling the kid from age 5 on how important it is to do well on these things, these crazy
You're
things.
okay. You're
because if they don't get into the right college, they won't have the right life, right? And the kid trying to escape poverty, often is holding a job or babysitting siblings with maybe a single parent who's holding down 2 jobs, and they can barely put food on the table. They can't afford a $400 an hour test tutor. They can't. And so when it's around test scores, particularly when they're tied to irrelevant, abstract academic content, I think it reflects one thing and one thing only, which is the resources and the push of the parents. And when you start to see school reimagined, where kids are getting a chance to invent and create initiatives that they think are important, it changes. I mean, those well-off, micromanaged kids, they often freeze up. You're like, but wait, it's not clear. What do I need to do to get an A? And the kids that are every day dealing with all sorts of hardship at home, when they're actually interested in it, not all, but so many of them soar. And then I just turn back and I say to our policymakers and say, which is better preparation for life? Memorizing what officious means and being fast at factoring polynomials, or creating bold, audacious initiatives that make your world better and sticking with them till you've accomplished something you're proud of? Which is better preparation for life? And if we did more of the latter, the achievement gap, I think, would certainly narrow, might actually be level, might actually reverse. And all kids would be better prepared.
And teachers would be happier. And
yeah,
the communities. And it's amazing how we're just so wrong. We have the equation so wrong. Yeah. And, I just, it pains me as a parent. And I don't have a good answer, and I'm struggling very hard with the whole concept because I have children that don't like school. And when they tell me that something is stupid, this parent kind of achievement, because I'm one of those parents, I'm like, okay, but you have to do it. Mm-hmm. But then I also have to say, but I agree, it is stupid, but then Mom, why do I have to do it? Yeah. I don't know.
But it's interesting. I'm a parent, so I've got a 23 and a 21-year-old. So I've been through this. And, I generally don't talk about my kids, but I will share with the audience this, is that when they were in high school, the deal I made with them was I would never look at their report card, that it was between them and their school. I explained the trade-offs. And all I really asked and encouraged was find things you care about and just go deep on them and kind of put to the side the hoops of school. And that's a scary thing. And I understand that. And so if parents are listening, they'd say, oh, what the hell? I don't know what would come of that. But I feel like oftentimes parents go absolutely to war with kids. And the kid's looking at it and saying, this is irrelevant. I don't care about it. I don't see why I never ever need to use it. And the parent maybe is honest, or maybe it's in the back of their mind, but they're saying, yeah, I've never used any of this as an adult. Mm-hmm. Look at high school math, right? One of my favorite whipping boys. But I just listened to last week to a Freakonomics podcast. And And it was on math, high school math. And they asked the Freakonomics community, which tend to be nerdy people,
Right, yeah.
how much of the core high school math, algebra, geometry, algebra 2, calculus, how much do you use as an adult, regularly? The high watermark across those subjects was 4%. 4% of Freakonomics listeners were regularly using, I forget which one, I think it was geometry, probably because somewhere in construction arts or something. And then you say, like, well, wait a minute, right? Whoever gave anyone the right to tell a kid they were stupid? Whoever gave someone the right to keep a kid from getting a high school degree over something that only a tiny percent of adults ever use, right? I mean, we don't say that every kid to graduate from high school has to pass some state-mandated cello exam, right? We don't do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I bet 4% of adults regularly play the cello, right? I mean, it's like, why do we pick math but not the cello? And I think the harsh, fair, ugly truth to that is that those low-level math questions are perfect if you live in Princeton, New Jersey, and work for Educational Testing Service. If your job is to make up tests for the SAT and College Board, for the ACT, for state-mandated exams, you love high school math. It's perfect for you. You can get 45 short questions, bundle them together, run your test, get a perfect bell curve distribution, and kids will then spend years studying it and getting Kumon tutoring and all this stuff. And then you just say, to what friggin' end? When, you start looking at adults and say, I mean, you're listening, okay? When's the last time you solved simultaneous equations?
I don't even know.
When's the last time you looked at a curve crossing the y-axis? When's the last time you did an integration by parts? Use the chain rule for derivatives. I mean, when? And it's like, the answer is I don't, right? I don't. And I'd say, like, if I couldn't give you a long list of things that kids would find are interesting, that draw and develop the most important skills, and then actually open up career doors. If I can give you a long list of those, and they're not happening at all in school, then how do you justify a bunch of stuff that almost nobody uses as an adult? And it goes beyond math. I mean, how many kids do spend time on opposite inhibit, or balancing chemical equations, or memorizing biology definition, or whatever, it's like on and on. And you just realize, whoa, we teach what's easy to test. We don't teach what's important to learn. And until we get that right, the issue is, it's not just a kid here and there. It's millions of kids. It's millions of families who are counting on education to open up great future possibilities for their kid, and getting it to the end of that process and saying, wait, it let me down. And it can happen in all sorts of ways. I use the rule of 5, if you bear with me on this. But for every 100 kids in 8th grade, 20 don't finish high school. They're screwed. Generally poor kids. 20 finish high school but don't do any more. If they happen to go to a great career in technical school, they might have great career paths. There's some amazing things going on in the CTE area across our country. That reaches a tiny number of kids. So otherwise, absent that, if you've been through a 24/7 college-ready K through 12 and you don't go beyond that, you're screwed. So now we got 40 out of 100 screwed. Of those that start down the path of college, it's like, 40, 45% never finish, often holding debt. So you're going to drop out from an anonymous college with a, 15, 25K of debt. I don't think those prospects are terribly good. And then you look at the ones who get to the finish line. So let's say that's 35 or so out of 100. Half end up in jobs that don't really require a college degree. So they're working at Starbucks with a lot of student loan debt. I don't think they're off and running with a great life. And then the ones that actually get the jobs that we associate as being college degree jobs, I talk to a lot of those kids. They're not very happy, right? I'm now an accountant. I'm sorry if somebody's an accountant. I mean, accounting, I actually like cost accounting, but, there are a lot of kids that, get to the end of that process. I'll share an anecdote. I'll interview a lot of kids, seniors in college, right? And I'll say, what are you doing next? And often it's either more formal, costly instruction. I'm going to graduate school, largely because I can't figure out what I want to do, but I'll just keep, on the treadmill spending more money because maybe it'll lead to something. Or they're going to the career services office and signing up for 12 interviews and hoping to get a job out of it. And I say, well, what's right? Well, it's just the ones that are coming in when I got a free time. Those are the places they're signing up. And I'll ask these kids, well, if you thought, what career path would you like to create? have you thought about creating your own career path? And they'll look at me and they'll say, you mean that's an option? And I'll say, yeah, it's a big, fat, juicy option. I mean, the number of jobs to apply for is going down. The number of jobs you can create is unlimited. Like there's an unlimited number of job paths, careers, could last 3 years, could last 20 years, the kids can create. And yet, coming through the school process, we have crushed out of them any possible thinking that they could create their own path going forward. It is just like,
it's not even mentioned.
Yeah, it's not even mentioned.
Yeah.
You're like, because so many times the answer, the essence of school is, what do I need to do? Not what do I want to do? School's totally different when you say to a kid, what do you want to do?
Right.
What do you want to learn?
Yeah.
What positive impact do you want to have on the world? How can we organize your learning experiences to accelerate that and help you reach that in the best possible way, instead of, well, what do I have to do? And it's,
I mean, that's the entire mission of what we do with EntreEd and just entrepreneurship education at the K-12 level in general, is that like you understand and it's not crushed out of you by the time you get in that position, that you have the opportunity to create your own pathway, because we feel like that's vital. And you were speaking exactly the experiences that I had. So.
And one thing, and I think sometimes, and I'm passionate. I mean, I was in venture capital, and before that ran a small business. So am I passionate about entrepreneurship? Absolutely. I think one of the most important broadening exercises we need to do, particularly with parents, but also with educators, is to understand and communicate that entrepreneurship is not just starting a company. There are a small number of people that are really destined in life to start I mean, how many people are going to start a Facebook?
Right.
They're
unicorns.
1 in a million. So, but a different way to look at it is, how can you create an entrepreneurial career? And that's a norm. And I would say, if I'm a classics professor at a 4-year university today, I need to think of my career entrepreneurially. I mean, it's not just somebody in business. It's not just somebody starting a new company. It's somebody thinking, what's something bold and audacious I can do? What do I need to learn? How can I leverage available resources to make progress? How can I stick with it, iterate, pivot, redirect, do whatever it takes to accomplish something I'm proud of that has, in a way I define and I'm proud of, a positive impact on the world? That vision of entrepreneurship, that applies to anybody and everybody. And I find sometimes, not often, but I'll find some incredible entrepreneurship mindsets being delivered to kids in the context of a history class. You wouldn't think of a history class as being a hotbed of entrepreneurship, but bear with me. Like if a teacher said, find something in the history of your community or your family that you think is important. Be really resourceful, creative, go after what caused it to happen and how it ripples through and shapes lives, shapes your life today. Come up with a really creative way to communicate your insights, and then do something to make sure they don't just reach me, the teacher, but they are shared and reach and move a broader audience. Could be classmates, could be the rest of your school, could be the community, whatever. That's a very entrepreneurial exercise in the context of history. One hop over, like I was involved with a nonprofit doing, promoting entrepreneurship. And so anybody that does that, I'm a fan of. But when I go to visit and observe classes, it was a kind of a dusty textbook, a teacher lecturing at students memorizing the definition of things I never had seen as a venture capitalist or entrepreneur, like what's the definition of return on sales? I mean, honestly, that beat me because I'd never seen it. And then kids starting businesses according to kind of a formula, that's not helping. That's not helping kids be. And the second thing I'd say about entrepreneurship, and I think it's the opportunity, and when I say this, people don't take me seriously for a lot of people, for a lot of reasons. People don't, starting with my wife, I'll just talk about it. I'll say, I don't believe this guy. But trying to teach a kid to be entrepreneurial before they have a proficiency that matters, I think is not a great thing. I think you need to have a kid good at something that the rest of the world cares about. That kid could be a 12-year-old or it could be a 50-year-old or whatever. But if you're good at closed form integrals, for instance, nobody in the world cares about that. So, like if school were just to kind of dumb it all down a lot, like a whole bunch of closed form integral, studies, and then, you'd be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Good luck. If you did create a really thought-provoking, history essay or a documentary about your town's history. The world cares about that. If you get really good at something like website design or social media campaign planning and implementation, I mean, a whole long list of things. If school got kids good at something that the world cared about, and then unleash them on using those skills to make their world better, oh my, it's like, and what I find so incredible about that, and I write about this, is the kids that are as young as 13, 14 years, even younger actually, but I'll be pushing the boundaries and getting people to believe me when I say a 10-year-old. But kids at a young age can have a set of skills and an entrepreneurial competence that they can make more than most college graduates. And people will say, well, wait a minute. No, like you're telling me that a middle school kid can make more than a typical college graduate? That can't be. I mean, what about all those essential things in school they have to learn in high school and then go to college and spend $75,000 to $300,000? How can they be? And then I say, well, here, meet this 13-year-old who's great at developing websites. They're making $35 an hour.
Right.
There's infinite demand in their community, but also they are on Upwork, so they're marketing their skills broadly. They got a great portfolio. I mean, like, is website design fun? I think maybe not for some kids, but a lot of kids would find it fun. Is there a great market for it? Yeah. Are you doing good things? Maybe some of them are. You do pro bono for charity. Like a million different things, and yet, how many of our high schools teach website design?
Yeah.
We teach, factoring polynomials or trig proofs or something, but we don't have time for, and it's like stepping back and saying, what are the real opportunities today, here and now, for kids to get good at something that matters to them and to the world around them? And should we have some space in schools for that?
Yeah.
And to me, it's just unequivocal. Yes, of course, plenty of opportunities, and we should carve out time for kids to get good at that. And then, just run into it. Well, it's not in the state mandated curriculum, or it doesn't help with the college applicant, or, we haven't done it before, or we need a teacher to teach it, which is oftentimes not true, right? You need an informed, caring adult to help kids learn it.
Mm-hmm.
Kids don't need to be taught some of these things. And I just look at this and I say, if this were a little deal, I'd just be having fun. Honestly, I don't need to do this. I would just be having fun. But it's a big deal, right? And if millions of kids are being shortchanged, the irony is, right, No Child Left Behind is leaving millions and millions of kids behind. Race to the top was actually a sprint to the bottom.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. And then how deeply troubling and disruptive is it to our democracy when millions are marginalized, adrift, don't see a way forward, can't, make ends meet. Honestly, what's the bigger issue? I don't know.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. This question, because you mentioned, I've seen you speak, and you mentioned that when you wrote your book, you found these amazing teachers, but they were in pockets. So how does a school find they're incredible teachers everywhere, but so you have this history teacher that's doing these incredible things, but it kind of ends at that door. So how would a leader see that and spread the tentacles out?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it, because it really gets at what's a change model that makes sense. Because I find in every school you can find a bright spot, But what I also find, if it's that one innovative teacher, they can get worn out. If it's one innovative school in a community, it's kind of positioned as that alternative school for those kids. And so, ironically, it's a lot easier for 10 teachers to innovate in the school than one. It's a lot easier for 10 schools in the community to innovate than one. And so how do you start to spin that up? And so I've been working since I took my trip in 3 different states, Hawaii, North Dakota, and Virginia, and I've been developing this change model. We call it the Innovation Playlist. It's just easy to find, www.innovationplaylist.org. And it's all around teacher-led, small steps that lead to big change, suggested, encouraged, but not mandated. And I was just in Virginia last week, and we've got, and again, the model isn't every district has to, but their superintendent of public instruction, James Lane, and I, so we're teaming up on this, and I'm helping fund it. But we reach out to all the districts and say we can support in the first cohort 20 to kind of embrace more cultures of innovation in their schools. Who's interested? And we had a really simple application process, but we got 60 that said they desperately wanted to do it. We ended up taking 26. They're now all sorts of great things. We don't really say it has to be this, but what we're doing is a lot of great film work to capture some of the exciting things. And so when you find a rural district in Southwest Virginia doing something bold, and you do a short video, and then you tell a district in Northern Virginia about that, they say, well, wait a minute. If they're doing, you're like, well, we're doing something we think is even better, or we think is different, but also really cool. And so we're just trying to create this. We're launching the next cohort in December with another 25 districts. And so it's sort of these waves of, and what we really are trying to do, and the playlist, I think, does a good job of it. And we're taking to the next level come next year. But it's not to just change the way a person goes about things. We try to reach the change agents in schools and districts, but it's not just to change that, it's changing the way the entire community thinks about it and offering tools that let every teacher in a safe way try to experiment with little things like enhancing student creativity or curiosity or whatever. And so I'm teaming up. I mean, we'll announce something next year, but I've sort of joined forces with Sir Ken Robinson. I don't know if you can, anybody who's listening,
Yes.
you haven't watched Sir Ken's TED Talk, how schools kill creativity, do it.
Yep.
But I think that change model, if people say, describe your change model, and the easy way is think of the exact opposite of top-down central planning standardized. If you said, what's the exact opposite of that? Sort of grassroots, teacher-led, creative differentiation, that's, I think, going to be the key going forward. And what's empowering about it is, that a classroom, a school, a district doesn't have to wait for everybody else. They can sort of start running with it. And I would say if we get the sprinters sprinting and not feeling like they're going to be tackled from behind and punished, then the runners will start running and the walkers will start walking. And I also say, if you've got an educator, and maybe your school might have several and many, that just doesn't want to change, don't spend a lot of time trying to make them change. Just ask them, keep an open mind as other people do something a little bit different. And if this is ever of interest to you, we'd love to see you give it a shot. But I think that's a far more effective change model than yet one more committee deliberating for 10 years and then whomping down with a massive set of things saying, we figured it out this time, do it. And teachers have no voice, students have no voice. It's very academic, college focused, and it often just kind of misses the mark.
I have a very related question, actually. So I have a colleague who was a fourth grade teacher, was just getting very burnt out, feeling like she was the only innovator. And so she moved to a very innovative charter school, no grade levels, no grades, no homework. And the biggest pushback has been from the parents. So I think what you talked about, capturing the stories of how it impacts, is really important. But do you have any advice on how schools can address these preconceived notions of what school is on the parent level? Because it's charter schools and really innovative programs like that are a contingent on students enrolled in their courses. And so when we have these pop-ups of innovative places that are contingent on enrollment, but the parents don't like that traditional, any advice on how schools can handle that?
Well, so the parents are a big factor here, and if a school is regularly getting pushback from parents that say, along the lines of, this isn't what I did,
Mm-hmm.
and so why are we doing anything different? And they get really grumpy about that. And parents are tenacious about their interest in their kids. And so, what I feel like is this, is that, we did this film Most Likely to Succeed. And I always say, we've had now 10,000 community screenings, 35 different countries with that.
Yeah, check it out, guys.
And when parents see that, and it's on the innovation playlist for free, it's like right there as part of the get your community energized or mobilized. When parents see it, at least makes them step back and think, right? Because, I can relate. If you went back and asked me 15 years ago, I would have said, with my kids, or with anybody's kid, I would have said, work hard, get good grades, get into a four-year college, the better the college, the better the life. I think that's kind of how parents view it. What I feel is true is a couple things. And I meet a lot with parents. They often hang out, and when I give talks or things, I just say, I'll stay as long as anybody wants to talk. And it's often parents that will stay till the very end.
Yeah.
Because they want to share something quite personal. And they'll often describe what they're doing. And I think they're hoping I will say, of course, that makes sense. And I generally say, I don't think that makes sense. We had one, it's in my book. But
There's a lot of examples of this in the book.
This woman who's got this daughter with her. And she can't be talking about this daughter because this daughter's like 12. And she's asking me and Greg Whiteley what she needs to be doing to get her child into Stanford or Harvard. And so we're thinking she must have a different kid hanging around. And we're trying to explain that. And suddenly we realize she's talking about this 12-year-old right with her. And Greg asked the 12-year-old, how happy are you? And the 12-year-old burst into tears. And so these parents, I say to parents, okay, you can wage this war. And two things I'd ask you to at least think about. Maybe more, like, what's that going to do to your relationship with your child? what's that going to ultimately do? You tell me all you really want is for your child to be happy. But if you're telling them that they absolutely have to do something that's not under their control, that if they don't get into this set of colleges, their life is going to be a mess. God forbid you go to this set of colleges. I mean, come on. It's like, and often when you talk to these college admissions officers, or parents will share back to me in the spring, we did everything right. We didn't get into any of our top choice colleges. And I'll say, believe it or not, these admissions officers, particularly an experienced one, are quite good at knowing when a kid is manufactured versus when a kid has actually done something passionate. And so you're like, if you encourage your kid to get good at something important, if you, as you guys stand for so strongly and do such great work, if you help them understand the entrepreneurial skills they need to turn that into a great, fulfilling career path going forward, and they can move forward with or without college, like, are you going to have a better relationship with your child? Absolutely. Is your kid going to be happier? Absolutely. Are they going to have a deep sense of purpose? Absolutely. And are they going to be able to take control of their life instead of holding their breath that they happen to have their application reviewed at the right time of day by the right college admissions officer? And I think too often we do that. We just sort of, in many ways, it's a loaded word, but a lot of families are kind of brainwashing kids and saying, if you don't go to the right college, it's over. I mean, I'll visit a lot of low-income high schools, and I just say, oh my God, it's like a sea of college pennants and posters that say, if you don't go to the right, you can do it.
Yeah.
You can go to college. I'm not against college, but, honestly, we went through the rule of fives. I mean, it's not working for a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And it's super expensive. And those four-year colleges aren't going to change. I think you're seeing, and one reason I'm here at this event with community colleges, I think they're more agile and more innovative. And I think we'll see what they respond to when I talk today, but I'm going to say I think some rebranding might be important.
Yeah.
If they were viewed as career accelerators, as a short-term immersion to really boost your life prospects, I think you'd find people saying, "Whoa, that could be really effective." Because if you want your kid to be happy and you want your kid to do something professionally they enjoy, step back and say, "Is that what I'm really accomplishing?" And with parents as well, I feel like if just because your kid comes home excited doesn't mean the teacher's doing something wrong. Having fun and really learning aren't, mutually exclusive. They actually go together. And so I do think parents have, and, at the end of the day, parents have a lot of discretion with a lot of the hours with their kids. And so, the values you impart to them, the priorities you put on them, the more you bribe them to do some things they don't care about, I think the more ultimately you're going to have to answer to that instead of helping kids just find the joy of learning and getting good at something. And then, as I say, I mean, I met somebody here a few months ago who wanted to be a great singer. I don't think this young adult will be a great singer, but he was very entrepreneurial. And he figured out how to do custom songs. Are these the best songs? They're not the best songs, but custom songs for niche documentaries or low visibility, places that want a custom song that don't have a big budget. And he sort of just plugged in and figured out how he can write creative songs that fit the theme or whatever they want to accomplish. And so he's in Los Angeles, makes a living, supports himself, can, lives in a nice place, doing what he loves. And I say, like, okay, but how many parents, if they're had a kid saying, I want to be in music, would say, oh, no, it got to be accounting, right?
Yeah.
Don't do music. Nobody can make a living in music. In my book I wrote with Tony, we talk about the employment rate for theater majors is higher than it is for business majors. Like, go figure. But, kid is excited about something and has an entrepreneurial mindset and some of those basic skills for how you turn it into a fulfilling career. Those kids are going to be just fine.
Yeah. It makes me think of Amanda. We had a great interview with some student entrepreneurs yesterday, and Amanda was one of them. She was a young lady. She was talking about when she was in high school, she was having a lot of depression, anxiety, and it seemed like from how she was speaking that she was a high achieving student that was just felt a lot of pressure to perform at that level and was not very confident. And through an entrepreneurship experience that she received at community college, really blossomed into who she was meant to be. And so I think that speaks a lot to what you're saying from a parent level, like recognizing that some of those settings that you're creating for these students are creating that depression, anxiety, and we're not allowing them to really blossom into who they could be.
And to sort of come full circle with where we started,
Yeah.
might be a good note is that if machine intelligence is wiping out millions and millions of jobs, does it make sense today to push your kid like crazy to go to the right undergraduate college, to the right medical school, and then 2 years of residency to be a radiologist, only to find out after 10 years and $500,000 of education bills, your job has been wiped out by artificial intelligence. Or to have a kid who's agile and dynamic and with that entrepreneurial mindset to create a great career path. And when that's run its course, whether it's no longer of interest to them or things have changed, whatever, they're really good at just sort of hopping over and doing something else. And if the educational offerings match that, if you're going to be doing something for 2 to 5 years, you don't want to spend 10 years getting good at something you're going to do for 2 to 5 years. You want to spend 3 months or 9 months, and so I think we've got those opportunities. We know what to do, right? It's not a mystery. We know what to do. I often note that a friend of mine is Pasi Sahlberg, who architected all of the education changes in Finland. And I said, Pasi, where do you guys get your great ideas? He said, that's easy. We get them from the United States. The only difference is we do something with them and you don't.
Okay.
So I say to parents and educators, we know what to do.
Yeah.
Are we really going to let some state legislator or some, SAT administrator tell us, that got to do something totally different? I hope not.
I feel parent shamed a little bit now because
oh, no.
Don't. I feel like you're approaching it from a really
it's really hard. It's so true. It's really, and you're talking, I'm sitting here and I'm picturing my child. I'm going, I took Fortnite away because the grade dropped to a C, and that was not right. And it's a hard path to walk there. What do you do when you have culturally parents that whole mindset has to change too, because parents are saying, oh, you just have to get good. That's what you do. You get good grades.
You could adopt the don't look at the report card model.
That would be a tough one to do, but I was thinking that myself.
It's a good practical tip.
But it does reflect, in the Fortnite anecdote highlights it. It's the difficult world so I'm much older than almost anybody listening. So when I was in school, first, the school part of my life was a minority. I might have spent out of a typical week during high school, half of my time on school with a whole bunch of unstructured time. And I didn't have social media and all sorts of apps intentionally designed to be addictive, right? You look at it, the irony, right, is that all the people developing these apps won't let their kids use any technology.
Yeah,
so,
it's so true.
So it's like if school's really boring and the safety valve is doing something that's entertaining. And so the trick is, or the challenge is, how do you take a kid fascinated with a video game and get them interested in how do you create a video game? Or, and I think that can be done, but, where in high schools will you find video game design? And which goes beyond coding. It's graphics design, it's understanding behavioral psychology, it's a whole set of things. And I think that's the opportunity for any adult involved in a kid's development, is to find they're all interested in things, and to find out what they're interested in, and then be really creative in thinking what is around that can become a great, fulfilling career path going forward. And, I visited a school recently that's in New York, that's middle school. And it was like just a typical random school with kids that are fighting their way out of poverty, some of the poorest kids in the country. And the principal came in and said, we're going to make the theme of this grade 6, 7, and 8 school rap music. Well, the education purists would be up in arms. Like hip hop, what a waste of time for these kids. Except they then said, is this a way to appreciate language arts? What is the math behind beats? What's the physics behind percussion? What's the history of rap music or whatever? And you realize that if a kid's got that hook, if we can broaden it, but the issue for schools is, that one kid might be interested in Fortnite. One kid might be interested in rap. One kid might be really interested in art. They're all interested in these things. If you want to make the centerpiece of school ranking kids against other kids in their school, ranking schools against other kids, schools in their district, ranking districts and states across the nation, the only way you can rank is have everybody study the same thing. So everybody has to study the same thing in anticipation of the same test so we can compare them. And once you do that, I think it's largely game over for real learning for our kids. It's a tough time. It's an exciting time, and I often say, I double down on it. The number of great career paths that you can create there's no limit to it. Don't worry about those jobs going away, because if we do it right, these kids will create great things. And so who knows? It might be, there are these, there are these sites now where kids compete on video games. I don't know. You're like,
I know all about that.
You know all about
I mean, but like, look at how esports are emerging. I mean, you're falling behind if you're not getting involved in esports. So, yeah, I mean, the future is, we can't project it. So we got to quit trying. Do we want to wrap up with like an advice piece, or what are you excited about piece? Because you kind of touched on both, but I let you pick. You can either give a tangible piece of advice for K-12 or something you're really excited about.
Well, actually, in this case, they're the same thing.
Yes,
like what I've observed over and over again, because people ask me about, how much money, like you're working in 3 states. That seems really ambitious. I mean, like that must be tens of millions of dollars. I say, actually, it's not. It's the money is not the issue. What the point I make is when you empower somebody to do something they find incredibly interesting and important, you don't need a lot of money to do that. They are off to the races. Let a student learn something they're interested in, they'll go for it. Let a teacher teach the way they entered the profession to do, to engage and inspire their kids, they go for it. And yet, if you say, we're going to make everybody do something they had no voice in, that somebody else has felt is the priority, not even the federal government or Bill Gates has enough money to pull it off. And so I think that it's that voice, it's like, that's what makes us human, right? We all have things we are intrigued by. We all have, how many kids in kindergarten are fascinated by science? And then how many kids in high school care about science? It's like, how did that happen? How many kids in kindergarten ask a million great questions? How many kids in high school ask great questions? Think about what we're doing to kids. And I feel like it's right there, right? We know what to do. And it's really, we'd love to have policies and priorities aligned with that. But I feel like any family, any classroom teacher, any school, any district, you can do this, right? I mean, it's just a matter of saying, we owe it to our kids to put in place the conditions so let our students and teachers do their very best work. And I feel like that's the obligation we all have.
I think this is a perfect segue because I really want to read this paragraph because it has changed how I've felt about education since reading this book. So I'm going to read this. And if everyone on this podcast that's listening has not read the book, go do it. But in today's world, everyone needs to be entrepreneurial, not entrepreneurial in the sense of starting a for-profit business, but in the sense of fighting tirelessly to improve your world through your skills, passions, perseverance, audacity, and community support. It is the essence of our humanity to create, to invent, to make our world better. Giving students and teachers the support and permission to be creative and entrepreneurial is not optional in the 21st century. It is indispensable. And I love that. I literally am getting emotional reading it because I feel that that is the essence of what we talk about at EntreEd. It's the essence of your work. And I think it's just a powerful message to leave with for this. So
I agree.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for all you're doing because it's the future of these kids, the future of our nation is all on the line.
Yeah. Sometimes we feel like the starfish analogy, but we're going to keep going.
We're just really appreciative of your time. And I know Toi and I were so excited and thankful for Dr. Becky Corbin for setting this up for us because your work has really transformed how we've approached a lot of things. And I think that's true for anybody who's been part of it. So
we're even using a video of yours
in our presentation later. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, but we're just, thank you again for being
thank you. Yeah. Thanks for all you're doing.